The Sabretooth series is very quickly becoming one of my most favorite new X-books of the current era. In it, we get a glimpse of life down under as Sabretooth and his fellow exiled mutants try to find a way to jailbreak out of their Krakoan prison, all while double-crossing and two-timing one another along the way. The series has a really interesting cast of characters, some of whom are getting their first real shots in a starring role in an X-Men comic. MELTER is one such character, and he joined Sabretooth down in the pit at the end of Sabretooth issue number 1. He, along with Nekra, Oya, Madison Jeffries, and Third Eye, were all deemed guilty by the Quiet Council for their crimes against Krakoa, and were banished from the mainland into its prison belly. While the series is taking its sweet time in divulging exactly what it was that all of these mutants did to end up down there, MELTER's crime has pretty much so far been the only one that has fully been revealed. In Sabretooth number 2, he started talking about how he practiced his powers on a rock that led to him breaking the Respect This Sacred Land law, which felt like a pretty lame reason to banish him for. But as the series has progressed, we've learned that it wasn't just that got him exiled, and we've since seen some of the intricacies that have led to his sentencing, and honestly, it's a lot more interesting than I initially thought it was going to be. If MELTER is a name that doesn't ring any bells in your X-Men encyclopedia brain, there's a good reason for it. He's a character who hasn't been published in any X-Men comic books whatsoever until right now. Pretty much his entire character history has been in like the Avengers style books, where he's played more of a villainous role, albeit one with a moral compass and a desire to do good. He first appeared during Norman Osborn's Dark Reign era, where he and a bunch of other young powerhouses went around posing as the Young Avengers. MELTER was the leader of the group, and he had dreams of being a hero, but didn't really know how to go about being one, and even though his group did stop some evildoers, most of the members were amoral and didn't really care about doing actual good. Not long after MELTER's group first debuted, the actual Young Avengers became aware of them and that MELTER was using their name, so they confronted them and a skirmish between the two teams broke out. Ultimately, the real Young Avengers decided to hold tryouts for MELTER's team, which excited him, but also worried him because he knew that there was some shady deeds done in his group's past and he didn't want any of it coming to light. MELTER didn't have to worry about that though, because to his dismay, he wasn't one of the members chosen by the Young Avengers to join the group. This made MELTER super angry, as all he had ever wanted was to be a hero, and he felt shafted that his team was being split up and divided, and that he was being regulated to junior Young Avenger status, so he sought out Norman Osborn for some backing. His team ditched the Young Avengers moniker and started going by the Young Masters, as in Young Masters of Evil, which is way more apropos for them. And they, along with Osborn's Dark Avengers team, ambushed the Young Avengers out of spite. But MELTER started having like a change of heart throughout the battle, and before things could get too crazy, he and his team teleported out of there. That was the beginning of the end of MELTER as the group's leader. After Norman Osborn's Dark Reign was dismantled, the team went underground, realizing that they were officially the bad guys now, though for MELTER, his new life of crime was really just getting started. He became involved with the Mandarin, who had assembled a whole bunch of Iron Man's old nemesis and gave them all makeovers with new superpowered suits in an effort to destroy Iron Man through a series of well-orchestrated attacks. MELTER's role in Mandarin's scheme was to cause chaos in downtown LA, which is just what he did by melting cars and buildings and stuff until War Machine came to take him down. The two of them fought, but MELTER never really stood a chance against a seasoned pro like War Machine, and it looked like it was going to be over before it even got started until Whirlwind and Living Laser showed up to help even out the odds. Together, the three villains incapacitated War Machine, nearly killing him, and then made their escape before they could be brought into justice by any of the other Iron Men. Mandarin's plan eventually worked, and Tony Stark gave himself over to his custody, where he was basically a prisoner along with all the other villains who Mandarin had quote-unquote upgraded. MELTER picked a fight with Tony in the cafeteria, and though MELTER was easily overpowered, the Mandarin wanted to make an example of him and activated a bomb that had been implanted in all of them. Luckily, Tony was there to play the hero, and he used his chest plate to short-circuit the bomb, and MELTER lived to melt another day. After leaving the Mandarin service, Melter moved to Bagalia, which is an underground city that is totally inhabited by supervillains. There, he rejoined up with most of his young Master's crew, as well as a bunch of other supervillain types, to form a brand new Masters of Evil supergroup, and they started doing a bunch of tasks for Baron Zemo. Eventually, the Avengers invaded Bagalia, and Melter and the rest of the Masters of Evil fought with them. It was all a setup, though, meant to distract the Avengers and trap them underground, while Baron Zemo and his team set out for the surface to commandeer a S.H.I.E.L.D. helicarrier. There, Melter and his evil friends wreaked havoc by stealing things and beating people up, until of course the heroes eventually made their way out from being trapped underground and set everything right again. His last big effort in comics was running afoul of supernatural Howling Commandos team when they invaded the Pleasant Hill prisoner encampment. Melter and a bunch of other villains were being held there as mind-controlled reformed citizens, but they eventually snapped out of it and fought the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents out of revenge, with Melter being taken out of commission by Man-Thing. And then that brings us up to today, where Melter is a citizen of Krakoa and currently a prisoner in the pit. We know that he still has inclination toward being a hero, even though most of his actions thus far have all been villainous. And his power is a big reason as to why he tends to gravitate towards evil doing, even if that's not what's in his heart. Melter's power is literally to melt things. He can agitate the molecular bonds that holds things together at an atomic level, loosening them to a degree so that they just fall apart completely and end up becoming a big giant puddle of goo. His limitations for this ability haven't really been explored yet, as every time he's used his power, it's been in a pretty impressive way. He's been able to use it very broadly, like by melting an entire building to the ground, and he's also been able to use it with a bit of finesse by isolating small objects like bullets and melting them as they're being fired at him. One of the first times he manifested his power was as a kid whenever he was playing with his parents, and he accidentally melted them to death. Obviously that was super traumatizing, but it showed that his power is also super versatile, and that it can work on both inorganic as well as organic material. That wasn't the only time that he melted a person either. Back when he was trying to be a young Avenger, he accidentally tripped an old woman on the streets, and when he was trying to help her back up, she accused him of trying to mug her, and she maced him in the face. The situation got him really heated, and he accidentally lashed out with his power and melted her into a steaming pile of goo. So even though his power is very versatile and can be used on a variety of substances, he's not very well honed with it yet, and thus he tries not to use it unless absolutely necessary out of fear that he'll do something reckless again. That said, when he is acting like a supervillain, he uses it pretty haphazardly, and he can melt all sorts of things like tires and robots and even War Machine's armor. He has also seemingly generated the ability to create blasts with his powers now too. He's not like a pyrokinetic in the way that Pyro can control fire, or in the way that Rusty Collins can generate fire, but it appears as though he is able to take his molecular melting ability and throw it to a target and make it look like fire. We saw him use power blasts against the Howling Commandos, and recently on Krakoa as well, so it feels like he has maybe suddenly developed this aspect of power in the same way that Magma suddenly developed the ability to fly one day without telling anybody. Regardless, he's got a very devastating power which feels way more villainy than it does hero-y, so the poor guy has a really hard time consolidating who he is into who he wants to be. Funny enough though, Melter's crime really doesn't seem to be all that bad at all. His is really the only crime that we so far have some clear answers about, and to me, it feels like he was just kind of a victim of unfortunate circumstances, though circumstances that still required consequences. In Sabretooth number 2, Melter tells his fellow inmates that he was exiled for breaking the Respect the Sacred Land law. He tells them that he was just practicing his powers by melting a local boulder, not expecting it to be a big deal for anyone. He paints a portrait of him being very innocent and naive and just ignorant of the fact that Krakoa is everywhere and everything on this island. So how was he supposed to know that by melting a mere boulder, he was disrespecting the land? But then, in Sabretooth issue number 3, we pull back the curtain a little bit more and learn that Melter isn't quite telling the whole truth. Yes, he did practice his powers on a mere boulder, but that boulder being a part of Krakoa, who is a living sentient island, meant that Krakoa had to find replacement energy for the section of itself that Melter destroyed. An often forgotten aspect of Krakoa these days is that he feeds off mutant energies. This was one of the reasons why he kidnapped the original X-Men way back in Giant Size X-Men #1, so that he'd be able to feed off of them. Most of the mutants living on Krakoa aren't affected by Krakoa's need to feed because the nourishment he takes is split between literally everybody, and it's so minuscule because of its so many people that it's hardly noticed by anyone. In X-Men #3, it was revealed that Selene and Emplate, two other mutants who must feed off other mutants in order to survive, are the ones responsible for regulating Krakoa's food intake, thus keeping his and their feeding frenzies at bay. But when Melter destroyed a somewhat large section of Krakoa in a matter of seconds, it threw the feeding schedule off, and Krakoa was forced to replenish itself off whatever mutant energy was nearby. Therefore, even though, sure, it looked like Melter's actions of disrespecting the land by practicing his power on a boulder felt small and not noteworthy, its consequence was pretty dire as he indirectly got a bunch of life forces drained, his own included. I mean, sure, one time is a mistake and it can be forgiven, and it looks like that is what Xavier did with him, but then Melter goes on to say that he did this again. And not only was he trying to practice his powers, but he was also secretly hunting for the Quiet Council's location, so his motive in quote-unquote practicing his powers isn't exactly as pure as he claims it was. His curiosity is definitely what killed this kitty, and potentially a bunch of other kitties along the way. Obviously, Xavier saw this guy as someone who wouldn't rest in his quest to find the Quiet Council, and if he was hurting other mutants along the way, then the only manner to deal with him was to take him off the board completely, hence why Xavier banished him into the Pit of Exile. During the group judging sentencing with him and all the other recent detainees, Melter is identified as having a 3 over his head, meaning that anyone here with a 3 is likely to have broken the Respect the Sacred Land law, as even if that's not the real reason why Xavier threw Melter into the pit, it's almost definitely the reason on paper for it. It's funny because whenever I made my Madison Jeffries video, my main theory for his crime was that he was actually the one looking to infiltrate the secrets of Krakoa and thus was destroying the land to get to it. And since that is actually the truth behind what Melter did, and he and Madison both have the exact same crime number over their heads, maybe my Madison Jeffries theory is actually spot on. Time will tell. So that's the scoop on Melter. He's becoming one of the most interesting characters in this series, as while everyone else is kind of working on their own agendas, he's the only one actively working to take down Sabretooth, which it looks like he did do at the end of issue #3 whenever he unleashed his power and melted him. We'll see if that's what really happened in the next issue, but it does feel like Melter has finally had the self-sacrificing heroic moment that he's dreamed of his entire super career. Please let me know in the comments if you have any thoughts on this character. He hasn't really done much in the world of Marvel Comics yet, but this could certainly be his time to shine at long last. If you like this video, please take a look at my channel for all my other Sabretooth Exiled videos. I'm profiling each character in their own little video, so go show them some love and feel free to browse around for other goodies like reviews and rankings and whatnots while you're there. You can follow me on social media as well if you like. I'm most active on Instagram, where I post daily panel scans with either a clever quip or a conversational topic, so feel free to give me a follow if you want some of that in your life. I want to thank you for stopping by and spending some time with me today, and please be sure to come back again soon for more great X-Mentations.